YouTube right here. I actually just had a discussion with one of my friends, and they ended up asking me why I'm constantly switching between games and I'm not really sticking with one when before I used to. And that actually got me thinking. They're right. I used to sit there and play games for hours upon hours upon hours and just stick with that one game. I wouldn't really play too many others. Well, now, it seems like I play one game, for a few hours in the day, and then I all of a sudden want to play a different game. And, I guess there could be several ways of, explaining it. Maybe my tastes have broadened in games, or maybe I've gotten better at games and so I'm mastering them more quickly, whatnot. I don't really think that's it, though. As far as getting better at games, not really. Have I gotten a little bit better at picking up games as I've gone through and lived my life? Yes, of course. I've obtained different skill sets that become more and more applicable and adaptable to new situations. But I think the reason why I switch between games for so long is games just nowadays don't seem to have the staying power anymore. Like with Call of Duty, hopping on, playing some online matches, maybe playing some zombies, all right, cool, I have fun for a few hours at that point. But then it all starts to kind of bleed together, and I get bored with the game. So then I end up wanting to play a different type of game. But that's not uncommon for shooters. Shooters usually, you don't sit down and binge play. You'll sit there, unless you're playing the story mode for the first time and you're just wanting to get used to it, you're wanting to run through there and then hop into multiplayer. But it's even happening with RPGs. Like with Pokemon. When I was younger, I played Pokemon continuously. It was one of those things where if I went for the entire day without playing Pokemon, it was a busy day. All right. Pokemon was my go-to game. Well, now I'm hardly playing at all. And the thing is the formula for Pokemon hasn't really changed all that much, so, there can't really be too much there, right? Well, wrong. Basically, what it is with Pokemon, a lot of the stuff seems kind of overwhelming after a while. They gave you a bunch of things to do, and I'm not going to fault Nintendo for that. In fact, it's an awesome thing. But when you're sitting there and staring down, having to get 700 different Pokemon, even with trading involved, it's a daunting task. And having to redo that every single generation, after a while, it gets monotonous. And not to mention the actual game mode itself, the in-game, not even the online battle, but the in-game. The battling in there is very rudimentary. The AI doesn't really pull out any real tricks or anything like that until you get to the end game stuff, at which point it seems like the game, after a certain point, will sit there and go, oh, well, we can't have you go through this in one go, so here's a team that everything on your team is weak against that no one would ever use under any circumstance. Really? So, I guess there's, some aspects of unfairness in a lot of games now as well, where you can tell when they're trying to pad out their gameplay. And once you hit that, then it becomes more of a grind and it becomes boring. I expect a grind in an MMO because, well, that's just part of the game. and you're working your way towards something. But when that thought occurred to me, suddenly I thought about it. Gaming just doesn't feel as rewarding anymore nowadays. I mean, like in World of Warcraft, when you would sit there and you would go out and you would mine and mine and mine and mine to go ahead and get all the materials together to make that epic piece of gear, you got a reward for it. You got something that was rare, that was somewhat unique to you, that made you stand out and apart from the crowd. Whereas nowadays in games, it's, alright, how do I optimize everything? The only game where that doesn't happen that I can really think of with any level of customizability whatsoever is the Souls series. I mean, I think it was funny that there were people that were going with outfits that were just, we'll say, unique, but they weren't looking at what stats it gave you or anything like that. In fact, some of the times, their fighting style didn't even implement the stats of the gear that they had. They just liked the look of it. And you could go ahead and recognize people by their combinations because there were so many different ones. That was something that was cool to me. There's another MMO called Mabinogi where that is another thing that that you can do. I mean, there's a lot of unique stuff. But that also got me thinking. I'm like, well, how would we get past that issue? I mean, I tend to think more in MMO terms because I'm either playing Minecraft or I'm playing an MMO, something like Ark or something like that. Where I'm playing with other people. And I thought about it, and I'm like, why don't they make modular gear anymore in games where you can go ahead and put different pieces of materials together to create something unique? I mean, yeah, have varying stats and that sort of thing, but have something tailored to that person. Well, the answer is very simple. A lot of games nowadays are cookie cutter model. They don't have that they don't have that customizability that they used to have back in the day. I know I'm making myself sound old by saying that, but I mean, it's true. They don't have that. I mean, hell, even World of Warcraft doesn't have that anymore. I mean, at least earlier in the game, you could go ahead and, yeah, there were popular builds, but if your gameplay style varied a little bit, you could tweak your characters, tweak what skills you invested in to go ahead and more fine-tune your character to you. But now they've basically taken that away, and it's all like, look, either you build like this, or this. Period. Or else you're worthless and you're not going to find any groups. And I think that sucks. Now, I don't expect every game to have, limitless customizability or anything like that. But you need to have at least some middle ground. I mean, like with an MMO, for example, go ahead and have it where people who craft, have it where all the different crafting skills have to intertwine with each other. So if someone's wanting to go ahead and make, even plate armor, well, that's still held together by leather or by cloth or whatever, Have it where they have to get parts from them and have varying levels of quality, different types of things, and have it where, like, if they go ahead and they, do a hard leather, yeah, it's more sturdy, but it reduces your character's agility or something along those lines. Makes their attack a little bit longer because it's less comfortable for them, and it's not as flexible. And then that could come into play with the durability. You know, have it where different parts of your armor have durability, have that be an overall rating. You know, that would be one way of justifying it. So then you have to replace parts of the armor, not have to go through and just general repair the armor. In my opinion, that would solve multiple problems with multiplayer gaming. For one, anyone who plays an MMO knows that if you're not there at the beginning of the MMO, which is a risk in and of itself, because the MMO might not take off, and you might just sink a bunch of time into something that doesn't really go for a long period, or never becomes really popular and the servers never get populated. But if you're not in there at the beginning, then you fall behind on the crafting. And the thing is the only time that those craftings are really important as far as the low-level stuff is concerned, which you have to grind through anyway to get to the higher-level stuff, then now it's a grind and it's money going into the Aether. A lot of people in World of Warcraft realized this, and so they stopped leveling their own stuff, and they would just find someone that was on at certain times during the day. You know, they would make several friends who had mastery in certain skills that they could go to and say, hey, can you go ahead and craft these for me? I have all the materials. I'll give you a little bit of money. And it would ultimately end up being cheaper than leveling. And the people with that mastercraft would appreciate it too, because now they're making money off of it. That's the reason why you would level something like that. But there was really no way of having anything unique. You know, you wouldn't have your own mastercraft thing that was unique to you, that, you know, that only you made, that you figured out. You wouldn't have anything like that. And that really sucks, you know? I mean, there have been some that have gone through and had basically a critical craft system. Okay, well, now you're relying on luck. And so now you're having to hammer in a bunch of resources to get this one thing. I mean, yeah, if you go ahead and get it and you get this basically cap level item thing, if you're not going to be using it for yourself, then yeah, you can sell it for a lot of money. But a lot of people aren't going to realize how much you actually put in trying to get that. And it's going to be really hard to get them to see the extra value in that extra 20 or 30 attack, or 20 or 30 defense, or 20 or 30 magic attack. You know, they're not going to really see why, for that small little bump, they're not going to see a justification for them breaking the bank to buy it from you. So that's a big problem with crafting. You know, even for the people who get in early and they master the craft, they don't really make a lot of money off of it. It ends up becoming a time and resource sink after a while. But it's less of a resource sink off, you know, for the people who got in there early. But people who come in there afterward don't have a lot of friends that are, you know, playing, so on and so forth. Maybe they're just joining guild. Not a whole lot of people in the guild really know them, so on and so forth. Maybe they're more crafting oriented, a lot like me. You know, maybe they're a lot more crafting oriented as opposed to combat oriented. Me, I love crafting things in games. It's one of the main reasons why I play games. But the thing is it always devalues after a while. Because once someone buys something, then they can just go ahead and repair it. So having a thing where, yeah, the items can go ahead and break would be good for the crafters. It would be annoying for the people that are out there fighting and so on and so forth. But figure it this way, they're the ones going out and getting the money. They're not being forced to spend that money on anything other than repairs. if you're going to go ahead and have it where you have to go to someone who's the proper level of crafting to repair that item. You know? So that way the market will self-balance. But a lot of games don't have the balls to do that, because that actually requires that you have populated servers. And it looks like a lot of these companies are expecting all these games to fail for some reason. And I don't get it. I mean, they could go ahead and change it afterward. You know, like if the servers aren't really all that populated, not enough people went through and did crafting, you know, and they've tried everything else, then yeah, go ahead and go to the NPC can repair this for X amount of money or resources or both. But I mean, at least give it a shot, you know, at least do that one thing to help people do that, because then people like me aren't going to be jumping from game to game to game to game to game to game, getting bored after a while because there's really nothing to do other than repeatedly grind the same enemies over and over and over again to accomplish nothing. Other than basically getting a digital permission slip to go up and grind another higher level group of enemies. That's not fun. There's one game that actually comes to mind that was actually really awesome as far as allowing for so much diversity that the game actually lasted for quite a while, a lot longer than anyone expected it to, and that was Chrome Hounds, where you could go through and build your own mech from the ground up. You decided what engine it had, you decided what type of mech it was going to be, you decided where everything was. You actually put that mech together piece by piece. And that was awesome. That allowed for some very unique things. I mean, hell, there were people that were making basically functional replicas of mechs from Zoids, from, you know, I saw basically a functional Megatron. You know, I mean, it's just, you were able to do so much stuff. Like me, my mech that I ended up absolutely falling in love with, that I made more as a joke to begin with, but found out it was actually a little on the overpowered side, was actually one of the most immobile mechs that you would ever meet. I mean, that thing, saying that it moved at a snail's pace is insulting to snails. Alright? But the thing is once I got that thing into position, it had so much armor and armor all over the thing. It had almost no weak spots. And by the time an enemy got close enough to even try to start plinking away, trying to find a weak spot, it was dead. I mean, hell, the motto of that mech was basically kill it with fire. You know? I mean, I was shooting halfway across the map and hitting things with my mortars, because I had built my mech in a way to where I was able to fire my mortars for a simultaneous hit. Firing 3 mortars at a time for 5 rounds. I also had 2 sniper rifles on the thing, one facing one way, one facing the other. So if something got directly in front of or directly in back of my mech, oh, it was dead. It looked like if you were to mix a really, really nasty porcupine with an armadillo. That was basically how it worked. And the thing is it got to the point where when people would see my mech settle in on top of a mountain, they'd just go out into an open field and sit there and wait to die. Hell, there was one person, they had their microphone on, and it was awesome, because in the lobby afterwards, they sat there and said that they thought that my mech was actually the top of a mountain and that there were a few dead trees growing out of the top of the mountain. They didn't realize that it was an actual mech. That's how massive this thing was. But then you also had, mechs that were, basically these teeny tiny little things that could move extremely fast, were hard to hit, didn't have any weaponry really to speak of, but were excellent at scouting. So people that weren't good at lining up those shots or whatnot, were still able to contribute. They're running around and people are trying to hit them, and it was fun. It was fun for the person trying to hit them, and it was fun for the person dodging. When you sit there and and you hear people all laughing in a post-game lobby, both the team that lost and the team that won, and they're all laughing together, congratulating each other on a good game. That is what happens when customizability is present. I've noticed that with cookie cutter games, the elements of those post game lobbies tend to become more hostile, tend to become less forgiving, tend to forget that you're there for fun, you're there for enjoyment. And yeah, people like to win. But the thing is, you don't have to win every single time. And if you're expecting everyone to be flawless at all times, you're expecting too much from anyone, including yourself. I've seen so many people that they've screwed up on what they needed to do in a certain situation, but because that situation didn't match up with anything that they had come up against, they figured that someone else had screwed up somewhere down the line and wouldn't accept responsibility. I've seen guilds break up over that sort of thing. I've seen friendships end over that sort of thing. And I think that's pathetic. If a real life friendship ends because of a video game, there's a problem. But it's one of those situations of, if these companies want to actually have some sort of retention and actually make, microtransactions in these games that you pay for initially to buy anyway, if they want to make those seem worth it, there has to be some staying power. And I'm not seeing that in a great many games. And it comes down to, oh, well, this is cookie cutter. So at that point, it becomes basically an advanced game of rock, paper, scissors. And the thing is, it's not the first time that rock, paper, scissors has killed games. I can think of one game series in particular. And it's an older game series, but it was definitely revolutionary in its time. And that was Monster Rancher. Monster Rancher was one of the best games, in my opinion, as far as monster battling, monster raising, so on and so forth. Because unlike Pokemon, your monsters could actually die. There was actually some stakes there. And your monster would die from old age. And so you had to really think about that sort of thing. Breeding meant that breeding wasn't actually breeding in that game. It was you combining monsters. So you lost the two parent monsters, but you were hoping to inherit certain stats from them, hoping to inherit certain moves, so on and so forth. And you ended up with some very unique combinations. Yes, did some people stick with a specific combination? Of course. But the thing is even at that point, those combinations would be different. They could customize those combinations through various means. And a lot of people absolutely love the game. So then the second one comes out. People are super excited for it. All right, awesome. I forget if it was in the second game or if it was in the third game. But one of those two. They introduced basically a rock, paper, scissors system into the battle system. And it got to the point to where if the computer got sick and tired of you winning, And it wasn't something that you could just opt out of. It wasn't something optional either. It was something that was forced. I mean, hell, there was one time I had a monster that was way up there in level, and I was just having to go through battles to get my rank back up because it was a new monster. But I'd been basically breeding through 3 generations at that point. This monster was a beast in the level that it was currently in. Well, I ended up going in with this monster, and my monster ended up getting completely wiped out. Didn't get a single hit on the enemy. The enemy was so weak that if I had just hit once with a weak attack, that enemy would have been dead. Yet it was able to chip me down. Because the game kept saying, oh, I win the rock, paper, scissors. Oh, I win the rock, paper, scissors. Oh, I win the rock, paper, scissors. No matter what I did, I was losing that rock, paper, scissors. Whether it was them attacking me or me attacking them. If it was me attacking them, they would automatically get the counter. And the way that that system worked was they would counter out your damage and get an automatic full damage critical with their strongest attack. That was the way that that system worked. And even with that, it still took that enemy over a minute to take me down. When I could have beaten it in less than 1 second if that first attack had just hit. And it was a high accuracy attack. There was no way it was going to miss, so it had to counter. All of my attacks were high accuracy, somewhat lower damage. But that was how I had made my character. I only had one attack that was somewhat lower accuracy and massive damage. But the thing is I was attacking with all my accurate attacks. So it had to counter over and over and over again. And so, basically, at this point, what I'm saying is, if these gaming companies want to force certain styles of gameplay into games, say, no, you play this way or you don't play at all, well, then we won't play at all, because there's always at least one company out there that has a play it your way game.